Hi, welcome to update number 8 on the Lackawanna Cut-Off. Amtrak's Project Phoebe Snow. Hi, I'm Chuck Walsh, and I'm president of the North Jersey Rail Commuter Association. And we're here again at the Delaware River Viaduct, over the Delaware River, of course, to talk about Amtrak service over the Cut-Off. Now, as you may or may not be aware, Amtrak has been here before. In 1979, it ran a train over this line from Hoboken to Scranton, trying to promote Hoboken-Scranton service. Now, that service at that time never came to fruition. Why is that? Well, there wasn't the money to do it. That's basically the bottom line. Now, what I bring it up now? Well, as you are probably aware, many of you are aware, there is a very large infrastructure bill which will be going through Congress over the next few months, which will provide additional funding, we hope, for not only Amtrak, but specifically this particular project. Now, how would that work? Now, in the past, we've talked about New Jersey Transit reactivating the Lackawanna Cut-Off, meaning that service to Andover, which is in the progress of being under construction, that the additional 21 miles from Andover to Slateford, just down the road here, would be part of the New Jersey Transit project. Well, it so happens that Amtrak has put Scranton service, in other words, New York City to Scranton service, on its 2035 map. So how would that come about? Could Amtrak actually pay not only to run the service, but also to reactivate the remainder of the Lackawanna Cut-Off? It's possible. It's possible. So how would that service actually work? Well, we anticipate if trains were being run from New York City to Scranton, that there would be intermediate stops. It would make sense to stop the train in various places along the line, up the Morristown line, on the way to the Cut-Off and into Pennsylvania. And we're thinking places like North Broad Street, maybe Secaucus, maybe Brick Church, probably Summit, I'll say probably Morristown, Dover, maybe Mount Arlington, Blairstown, and then into Pennsylvania here at the whatever stops the people in Pennsylvania promote over here on the way to Scranton. But it doesn't stop there. There have been proposals in the past, specifically by Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer, to have service go as potentially as far as Syracuse. Now, Scranton is roughly 130 miles west of New York. And by the way, that's all publicly owned railroad. So that gives the project a big advantage, as opposed to other competing routes or new routes which may involve a freight railroad. But above and beyond Scranton, you have another 60 miles to Binghamton, and then roughly another 70 miles or so to Syracuse. Now, why go Syracuse, Binghamton, Scranton, New York? You could run a train from Binghamton now. You could via Port Jervis. Well, that route is over 20 miles longer, and presumably the demographics seem to be a lot more desirable, and as a result, they're willing to wait for this particular project to go via Scranton. Now, if you're also curious about what's going on with the Cut-Off, there's going to be work that's going to start. Right now, we're being told October on Roseville Tunnel, so that's going to be picking up this year as well. So that's good news on top of all this. Now, I mentioned about Phoebe Snow. Why would we call this Project Phoebe Snow? Well, you may or may not be aware, Phoebe Snow, well, it was a person. In other words, it was an advertising campaign run by the Lackawanna in the early part of the 20th century, but it also became a train in 1949 and ran until 1966, along basically the route we're talking about, with certain modifications later on, but for the most part we're talking about the same route. And Phoebe Snow has been historically sort of a metaphor for passenger service on the Lackawanna Railroad. So we think that's appropriate from that perspective as well. But there's an additional reason. And that's kind of a personal connection to the President of the United States, President Biden. President Biden grew up in Scranton. He was there, well, certainly up until the time he was in his mid to late teens. So he remembers the Phoebe Snow. How do we know that? Well, we've had people talk to him, and he recognizes the name Phoebe Snow. And if you were a kid growing up in Scranton, you knew about Phoebe Snow. So, and since he's Amtrak Joe, obviously he's earned that name with his long-term support of Amtrak. Scranton, I think you kind of see where the connection is. So we think Phoebe Snow is a pretty good name for the project. So that's where we are right now. Very preliminary, let's put it that way. But we feel it's important to put this out there to say, yeah, this is what we think can happen. And certainly we look for your support when you watch this, but this is not fantasy. This is a definite possibility, especially since Amtrak itself is the one who's proposing this service. So that's update number 8. Stay tuned. We hope to have a lot more that will be coming up about this. An update number 9, whenever that is, on the Lackawanna Cut-Off.